Really excited to be talking about closing more deals with mutual action plans today, better collaboration, transparency, and consistency with sales and onboarding processes. So really excited with especially the group of panelists that we have today that we'll introduce in a moment. Just want to do some of the kind of due diligence. So we're going to be talking for probably the next 30, 40-ish minutes or so, all about sales best practices. Again, how to collaborate more effectively and efficiently with your customers. We have a number of exciting questions and also want to make sure that everyone that's joining today feels similarly collaborative, that people are jumping in with different thoughts, either tactical or strategic questions that they have related to sales and onboarding, especially when we have this awesome panel here to answer them. I'll be doing most of the moderating, maybe chime in with one or two thoughts, but we'll let the experts kind of speak to everything today. And yeah, maybe we can dive into some intros. Maybe start with a good old friend of mine, Skip Miller, who actually taught me most of what I know about sales through doing a lot of sales training when I was at Stripe, and soaked up everything that he was teaching us there. So Skip, if you want to do a quick intro, and then we can go around the panel here.
Yeah, hi, Skip Miller, and I taught Ross everything he knows. We've been doing sales management training.
He knows.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I've been doing sales management training for about 25 years here in Silicon Valley, and just like what I do and have really good customers, and always want to make sure we look things from the buy perspective, not the sales perspective. There's always a good two-way street there. So that's what we do.
Amen. All right. And Alice, how about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Alice Heiman, and some of you may recognize my last name because you know of Miller Heiman. So my dad was the co-founder of that company. I work with CEOs of companies that have a business-to-business complex sale. They're usually in tech, SaaS, or some other type of innovative company. And I'm helping them increase their sales so that the valuation of their company increases. And these companies are usually 5+ years old and 5+ million in revenue. So I have a lot of fun helping with strategy. And I have known Accord sort of since the beginning, watching them grow, and it's pretty exciting, I must say.
Awesome. Thank you, Alice. And Aaron, how about yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Aaron Cramer. I am currently a enterprise accounting executive at Figma. I've been on the Figma team for about 3 years after starting as the fourth sales hire on the team. So I began working with mid-market customers and have since moved up and now work with our enterprise customers. I've been working with Accord in particular for about a year, and it's a part of all of my sales cycles. So it's been incredibly valuable to have mutual plans in place. So I'm excited for the conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I forgot I didn't introduce myself. So Ross, CEO and co-founder of Accord. Been working on Accord, better way to build a repeatable collaborative sales and onboarding process for the last 2+ years now. Before then, spent about 5 years at Stripe, helping build their, when they moved from self-serve to actually selling deals, figuring all that crazy stuff out from, a couple of us to a 450-person global sales org. So trying to take a lot of the learnings from there and get back to the startup community, which is kind of the premise of today's conversation. So to dive right in, again, I just shared on the chat. Please feel free to ask any burning questions that you have for this amazing panel. Tough things that you're thinking about or challenges related to this. Definitely want it to be more of a conversation than just kind of on stage here. So excited to see those bubble up. But maybe to start with a question for the panel, would love to hear how you think about mutual action plans as a lever for creating a more collaborative sales and onboarding experience. So maybe we can go back in that direction. Aaron, I'll pass it off to you. Yeah, how do you think about using these shared plans to create a much more collaborative, transparent process in your deals?
Yeah, well, I think in general, sales is changing, and I've seen the difference just within the last year of selling with a mutual plan and without one. I really aim throughout my entire sales cycle to be a partner genuinely, and one that builds on a relationship. And so with that comes trust and transparency. By having a mutual plan, I've been able to take my deals from feeling very transactional and like I am simply someone there to pass along documents or get something approved or something like that, to rather somebody who's on the same side of the table. And so with mutual plans, they've created a collaborative sales process in the way that my customer and myself are aligned on the next step and the step after that and the current step in place. I get amazing feedback from the folks that I'm working with on, they love the intention behind it. They love the fact that I am listening to them. When I present a mutual plan, I do it through and initially set it up. I do it through like a live conversation. And so they're giving me feedback on the next step of their process and their requirements, and I'm putting it in live, and they feel heard and seen. And so, with that, it's changed everything about the way that I'm selling. So pretty much any size deal, I'm now putting an intention in place to have a mutual plan, like a quarterly goal of mine, and something that I am held accountable to with my managers also, to have mutual plans in place, because I've seen the success of them. So
I love the call out. Just to jump in there, I think you said something that's super important that a lot of people miss. And it's funny because it's in the name, mutual action plan, mutual, but I think a lot of people miss this, is including the customer's feedback. And I think a lot of people will email this over, send it over. I don't know if it's my gut is that it's a confidence thing. They're a bit like, they're not ready to jump in and say, hey, this is the best way that we work with people. And it ends up coming across exactly what they're worried about, which is like sending a close plan over. They're like worried that their customer's not going to engage with it. They're worried that it's going to seem like, a bit assumptive. But if you say, hey, I've worked with, dozens of folks just like you, this is the best way that they've gone through the process. Let me hear what's happening on your side. No one's going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're sending this thing over. You're trying to close me. Like, this is like, wow, I can't believe you're including my process to this, and it doesn't feel like you're working me that way. So I think that's a really good call out, Aaron, and super important when we're talking about mutual plans, is really how to make it mutual is so much of the sales rep, and how they approach it. So Alice, I'll let you jump in here next.
Yeah, mutual's the key, right? You do it together. That is the way that you build the plan, and that's the way it always should be. Now, on the other side of it, Aaron, I have been doing this for 25 years, and I'm delighted that you're using mutual action plans. As a seller, I always used one. We didn't call it a mutual action plan back then. I just called it an action plan. And I always would sit with my customers and say, hey, what are we going to need to do to make this happen? Whether you buy it from me or buy it from somebody, there's some steps we're going to have to go through. So we may as well outline them together. Then you'll have it, and it'll make it easier for you to make a decision and, know what all the steps are, whether you buy it from me or not. Right. So I've always acted in that way, that I'm going to help guide them to the very best decision. And a mutual action plan helps us do that. Now, of course, when you're the only sales rep that does the mutual action plan, it almost guarantees that they're going to buy from you, because you've made a clear path. You've untangled the spaghetti bowl of decision-making that Gartner talks about, and you've made it very clear and easy for them to see the path to get what they want. Now, remember, as sellers today, we're all in the business of change management, right, Skip? I mean, that's what we have to do. So if we have to help people change their behavior, change what they're doing from something where they maybe already have some deep sunk costs from doing it a certain way, or they've never used a tool like ours before and have to change their processes and procedures and everything, either way, they have to change. And there's lots of ramifications to that, far beyond choosing our product and what they pay for it. It impacts their entire organization in some way, and everybody's workflow and everybody's workload, which is a lot of the reason that people will stop and not purchase, because they're like, it doesn't matter how great this is. We have the budget. We don't have the people power to do it. Right. So that mutual action plan helps you learn that as well. And you learn a lot together. Now, as a sales leader, I need all of my salespeople to use a mutual action plan. Not every single time, because some of these smaller deals just don't need it. But there's a threshold where it should always be that way. And if your salespeople are not using a mutual action plan, how do you coach them, for goodness sakes? What are you doing? How can you ask them questions? You don't even know what's going on here. You go look at your sales funnel and see what their next action is. I'm sorry, that just isn't enough. We need more information to be able to be great coaches. So that's what we've got to do. And then as a business owner, I want to make sure my sales leaders know how to coach a mutual action plan, because I need them to be great coaches of that so that my salespeople can be peak performers and highly successful.
Totally. Yeah. And I think you again mentioned one thing that I think some people miss is it's not just for the deal. It's not just for closing it. It's for building successful partnerships.
That's right.
You know, a lot of people close deals and they never go live, or it's a potential trinket, all this stuff. When you bridge and look at the change management stuff that you mentioned, and how you're going to build a successful long-term partnership.
And here's the great thing about using a mutual action plan. I know Skip's going to agree with me on this. Even if you don't buy it from me, but I'm the one who did the mutual action plan with you, I now have a completely different kind of relationship with you than I did before. Yep. And I can leverage that in some way, even if you didn't buy from me, because you'll be happy to refer me, or you'll come back to me in the future. So I win no matter what.
Yeah. And Skip, love to hear your thoughts.
When buyers feel heard, right? They heard me, right? I mean, you're developing a different relationship. You're exactly right. You know, Ross, I fully agree with what Alice said, and Aaron as well. I mean, and let's play off that. If you look at sales, and we do a ton of startup work. I mean, I love companies, you know, when they're at the million, that the founder's still selling. When they get to 10 million, they hire their first salesperson. When they get to 100, they're always progressing, but they don't change their process. And the early startups we see, it's a show up, throw up, spray and pray. If I could take everything in my head and put it in your head, you'd see why you want to buy from me, which is always kind of fun.
Right.
And then they generate, you know, we're collaborative, and it's not collaborative. It's iterative. I send you something, then you send me back. Then I send you something, wait a couple of days and send you back. So it's not collaborative, it's iterative. And true collaboration is going to have to change people from following to leading. If I do what my customer tells me to do, and I do it well, I'll get the order. Nah, I don't think so. Because buyers want to be led, but buyers want to be led through a buy process. So if I put an action plan out there, and just like Aaron said, okay, here's the feedback. Aaron, I'm going to trip you up. You said when I present an action plan, present is a one-way kind of communication. Never present. We talk about it, we discuss it, but I would never present, because when you present something, that's one way. So I caught you. I mean, I fully understand what you meant, but you want to put, guys, here's the action plan for the next 6 weeks. Here's what you got to do. We got to do. Let's have 15 minutes and redline this, work it together. Well, Skip, that's kind of assumptive here. I mean, they're the ones buying. I'm supposed to just do what they tell me to do. I'll do the presentation, then I'll do the demo. I'll ask your questions. I'll send them a proposal. Oh, get over it. If we're not early, mid in the sales process, really working with the customer, your chances of winning that deals. It was funny. I was talking to Aaron, Ross, and Alice before the program started, and I said, you know, Aaron, how many deals are you working on right now? And he said 20 or 30. And I said, how many over X amount? You said 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And then I said, how many action plans do you have with them? And what'd you say, Aaron?
All of them. Yeah.
And of those, how many are going to come in?
Well, for this quarter, those that were, because I had a mutual plan, I was able to forecast them. Those that I had planned on, they're all in. So
you want to shorten your sales cycle, people? Use a mutual action plan.
I'm looking at companies who say, I'll get 2 out of 10, 4 out of 10, maybe 6 out of 10. But if you can get 5 out of 5, to Alice's point, you're going to shorten the buy sales process in a heartbeat. So it's a tool that if not used, you're guessing. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Hey, I want to throw something out there to the audience real quick and get some participation going. So everybody in the audience, type in, I am using a mutual, I do use mutual action plans right now, or we have not started using them yet. So everybody, I'm waiting to see, I want 100% participation. I am using mutual action plans, or we have not started using them yet. Go. All right. I see we have not. We use them. Okay. We have not using yet. I do use them, but I know I could do a better job. Great. Are not. Some are okay. So more people are not using them yet. Come on, I need 100%. Who isn't
Well,
typing in? Let's go. A newbie here. Great. Okay. What is a mutual action plan? All right, Marcin, we are going to answer that question for you. And I'm glad
you asked that,
it.
Alice, because yeah, we should definitely go through some of the basics.
Yeah. Could you please explain the examples of mutual action plans? We absolutely will do that. So if you haven't started mutual action plans yet, obviously go to the website. There are of Accord, because there's a lot of articles on that. If you go to my website and type in mutual action plans, you can read an article on it. That will give you some base. But let's go ahead and run through what is a mutual action plan, Ross.
Yeah, I was just looking up. I'm going to post a blog, share a blog post.
Yeah, could you do that?
Wow, Mari beat me to it. I knew
Yeah.
what she was doing exactly. Who just put together these great resources around mutual action plans. So the idea of a mutual action plan at the base is what Skip calls the buyer journey. You're not sending them your Salesforce stages with all the next steps. You're sending the equivalent of that from the buyer perspective, which is what do they need to do to successfully evaluate, validate, purchase, onboard, and be long-term successful with your company. So it's really flipping the whole sales process on its head and looking at it from a buyer's perspective. Who needs to be involved? What resources they need to consume? What business case they need to build? What next steps they need to go through? All of those pieces of it, and simplify it again for the buyer based on the hundreds of deals, thousands of deals potentially that your company's done. You've learned a million times more about this process that any prospect, no matter how much research they've done, could possibly know. So
yeah, pause right there for a second, Ross. Yeah. I want to just say this. You sell what you sell all day long, every day. You've been doing it, some of you, for years, right? This might be the first and only time your prospect has ever bought what you sell, or it's been such a long time since they bought it. They don't know how to buy it. They're depending on you to tell them. Don't assume people know how to buy. They love that you know, hey, at other companies like yours, this is the process. This is what they do. Does that sound right? Go ahead. Sorry.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry, Aaron, go on.
I'll also jump in on that. I mean, I think it's something that has been a common theme that hasn't been just so explicitly said. Like, buying is hard.
Right.
Being a buyer is not easy, especially today when you're in a large organization. There's so many more decision makers. It's not just one person in a single relationship making a decision. And so what I hear all the time, and I think this is a good transition also even into the conversation around like, why do people not make mutual plans?
Yeah.
But it is harder to buy than it ever has been. And it's also hard to stand out as a salesperson. I think, like both of you mentioned, if you put a mutual plan in place and you sell to someone in a consultative, like mutual posture, they're going to take something away from that, whether they buy your product or not. And I think that to the I guess the second part of that question of what I mentioned was like why people don't is because there is like a cost to it as the salesperson. You have to be more than just a transactional salesperson. You have to know their needs and their issues or their process in place in order to build one. Building something that's like fully scoped out requires you to put the time and attention into scoping it out. I would be curious, especially like we mentioned, I'm fairly new to this, but I think my perspective is interesting because I feel such a contrast of selling an old way a year and a half ago to the way I sell now. But I'd be very curious, Skip and Alice, why you think that people don't make mutual plans.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. But just to complete the thought about what is a mutual action plan, Ross, I want to say, like, people are probably like wondering, like, literally, what is it? Well, for me, it's a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet, could be used very simply to put down all of the activity that you will have to do to get this product or service in place at the company and up and running, including the onboarding, everything from start to finish. And it's a list. And then next to that, in the next column is who's going to do it and by when. And things like when you are doing a complex deal. Now, if you don't have a complex deal, you don't need a mutual action plan because there aren't that many steps, right? But if you are doing a complex sale, good, great example. And then you have to work through to bring everybody consensus, and then legal has to have it. And then right there, that's a roadblock. And we know that something's going to sit in legal for like 2 weeks. That has to be on there and it has to be put into the timing. It's one of the things that lengthens deal cycles and also makes things not get delivered on time. It's because stuff is sitting illegal. So you got to plan for that ahead of time. So you kind of trying to find all the things that people are going to have to do and all the people involved and decide who's going to do them by when. And again, whether they buy from me or not, now they understand their own way to buy internally, and it's all mapped out for them.
Aaron, years ago, I used to sell computer design and manufacturing systems, CAD/CAM systems. And I was in Cleveland, Akron area, and I'm dealing with a company called Ferrio Brothers. Don Ferrio was president of Ferrio Brothers. John Ferrio was head of engineering. Rick Ferrio was head of purchasing, Ferrio Brothers. And I'm in my final presentation. I have $500,000 CAD/CAM system. I got it done, got it the whole bit. And I get done, and there's that unusual, dead silence and stuff. And I go, what's up? What's going on? Guys, you could tell it was going wrong. So I said, you know what? Stop it a second. I'm going to change my name. I'm going to change my name to Rick Ferrio. I actually said that. And I said, you guys are not looking at what you should be looking at. You should be looking at this and this and this. It's all wrong. Don Ferrio stands up, goes to a flip chart, flips over the page, and there's the entire buy sales process. And guess whose handwriting? It was not in mine. So I go, guys, I see that. Perfect. But we got to do our thing and stuff. He goes, well, Skip, I appreciate that. He goes, but your competitor's in the office lobby right now waiting for the order because we're going to give them the order today. But you've brought us some good points. He goes, could you go to the room next door? We're going to bring the guy in, dismiss him, and then come back and we'll work with you on putting this thing together. So they put me into the room next door. Couldn't hear a thing. And they came in, and then I went back to my office and I was talking to our project management consultant. His name was Otto Buffet. And Otto goes, Skip, that's a PERT chart. I go, I don't know what's a PERT chart? He goes, it's a project management chart. I go, what's that? Well, in a project management, you have their activities, your activities, you work on them together. So we developed a PERT chart. I went down to Ferrio Brothers like 2-3 days later and showed them this PERT chart. Their steps were in red, our steps were in green. And you own the process, you own the deal. You brought up a point. Why don't people do this? Because we are reactive. If I do what they tell me to do, and if I do what my company tells me to do a presentation, do a demo, and send a proposal. Nowhere does my company tell me to put together a PERT chart or an Excel spreadsheet or an action plan with steps. No one tells me to do that. I didn't know I should be taking control of this. I'm just doing what they tell me to do. That's the big difference, I think.
Yeah, before we did our training, I was just making up as I went. I'm like testing out, iterating a bunch of different stuff. And I tried pretty much everything that, the best practice sellers write about and talk about. All of that stuff works. It sounds like, Aaron, very much like your experience moving into enterprise.
You just have to have, Aaron, let me ask you a question. What was getting in front of a customer going, listen, would you mind if I put a program together where we work on it together? No, it's our buy. We got to cover. What was the confidence level you had, Aaron, to actually start doing this?
It was high because I had exactly I don't remember who mentioned it, but we've been through the sales process so many times. I've learned from my experience with other customers what does work from our end, what we can provide that helps. But I understand that they're going to have things that need to be fit in. So I basically think of it as a consultation around hey, this is what I know a lot of teams need. This is what I understand as a typical part of the process. Where can we fit you and your process into this? What do we need to remove? What do we need to add? And I do that on that call where I mentioned it was a presentation. I appreciate the, response there. No, it's great. It's great. We do it together and I love it. I'll actually delete things that are a part of my assumed process. And I'll say, hey, some folks need this. They need a trial. They need this or that. And they're like, hey, we actually don't need that. We feel good. It's like, okay, let's remove that. Let's make this custom and actually tailored to your needs.
Aaron, we call there's two different value propositions: user buyer, fiscal buyer. We call them above and below the line. So you have your below the line people who are actually going to use your stuff, and the above the line people who are looking at this thing to help them get $10 million of the revenue, whatever else. How often are you working with above the line people, or is it always below the line?
So very similar to that, I think of like champions and change agents, and then like an executive sponsor in my sales process. I would say champions are typically like an individual contributor below the line.
Yeah.
So when a mutual plan is in place, I'm probably above the line. Those are the folks who are like the change agent, somebody who we can put those steps in place and say, hey, we have to get this done by this date, or else
We consistently see this mutual action plan being a vehicle to get to above the line, rather than just hoping that the BTL will take my proposal up and it gets blessed.
Right.
Yeah. Do you see it too,
absolutely.
Alice?
It should be a good way to determine who else is involved with the sale that you have not been talking to, but that you need to talk to. And even if, worst case scenario, you don't get to bring this forward to them, or your senior executive or someone on your team doesn't get to bring it forward to this higher level person, at least they're there, and you can now prepare someone on their team internally to take it up there, but prepare them properly. So you're not always going to get to these higher level people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can if you bring in a senior executive from your team or a subject matter expert, but even when you can't, at least you uncover that they're there and they're part of the decision making, and you can make some sort of plan to get them the right and relevant information that they're going to care about.
Hi, Mr. Above the Line person, Ms. Above the Line person. We're working with your team. Super. Just want 10 minutes of your time to make sure we validate dates here, to make sure you know what's coming and you can be prepared. If they say no, that's going to tell you about the energy of this deal, isn't it? Have you gotten a lot of pushback, Aaron?
Not really. No, people feel, again, it's hard to buy. And so when building these mutual plans, like I'm providing so much like clarity into what's next, and it's all contextualized. One thing that I've talked to, kind of a little bit of a tangent, but one thing I've talked to a lot of folks on my team who are interested in mutual plans is in the value of context, right? So if I'm asking over email, hey, do you have this by this date or something like that, it feels so transactional. It's just like I'm receiving something from them. When it's put in context of 12 other steps, they realize, hey, if we don't actually accomplish this by Friday, like we agreed to 3 weeks ago, everything else falls off.
That's right.
As long as you're okay with everything falling off. Oh no, I never thought of that.
And when you try to do a mutual action plan, you've been going down this path, talking to several buying influences, working, with people, and you're ready to do the mutual action plan. If they don't do it with you and give you dates, and it's a clear signal that they are not moving forward. And oftentimes salespeople get ahead of themselves, right? And this is why, as a leader, I want to coach against these mutual action plans. So when they're not committing to the dates and they're not giving you information, they're not forthcoming on these mutual action plans, that is a clear signal that they are not ready to move forward. And you need to take that signal, and you may need to say, originally you told me this was your timeline. Based on our conversations in this mutual action plan, it doesn't sound like that's actually going to happen, or that maybe that timeline has shifted, so you can ask them more questions about that. So when I look at the mutual action plan and I see a lot of missing things or missing players, or I can coach against that, right? And give the sales reps some ideas and things that they need to do, or I can see where they're stuck, or perhaps even see that a senior executive does need to get involved and what the timing might be on that. There's some questions coming in.
Yeah, I got that. I want to take Sarah's there. Hey, Sarah, I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Every Christmas we pile in the car. We go down to Tampa, Florida for Christmas. And the only people who knew where we were going, my mom, my dad, and the AAA. Because the AAA had this little series of maps called a triptych. And I was the guy who was always had the triptych. Cleveland to Columbus, turn the page. Columbus, Cincinnati, turn the page. Cincinnati. By the time we got done with the triptych, we were in Tampa, which is where we wanted to go. Now, if we didn't have a triptych, we would have all piled in the car and probably ended up in like Houston, which is a great place, but not where we want to go. Sarah, triptychs are always built backwards. They're built from Tampa to Cleveland, never Cleveland to Tampa. So your question of how can we make sure that we stay on track, that we don't slip, and slip dates? Guys, you said you want to get to Tampa by the 15th of January, right? We have a phrase that says BBB, buyers buy backwards. If you say you want January 15th, this means you got to do this by the 10th, which means you got to do this by the 1st. That's how you build energy. If you build it the other way, let's add a week. Let's just add a week. There's no end date. There's no what we call I date. Right. So if you want to build a great mutual action plan, we call them triptychs, right? Build it backwards. Build it from the I date. Well, okay, John, and not contract sign date. That's an artificial sales date.
Right.
What date do you say
The
you want to
value
go
that they're
live,
looking
up and
for.
running,
Yeah.
in production, right, John? Right, Ross?
The value that they're getting from it. That's the way you can bridge it back. And we're talking about like the right decision makers above the line. Hey, what is the business result? You're the small part of the really big problem they're working on that is never going to get deprioritized, right? It's never going to be a timing issue. What is the one thing that they need to get done as a company this year, milestone? This needs to tie into that. It needs to be done in order to impact that. So when you're saying, hey, I'm just following up, you're not just saying that, you're saying, hey, I know that your company's objective is to get this thing in place for this launch or for this thing. I'm worried if we don't get this done by this date. That's why I'm following up. That's how to be a partner. That's
You guys say you got to have this up and running by the
salesperson.
15th. If that hasn't slipped, then you got to
Right.
get, well, hell, I thought I had another week here. I guess I don't. Always build backwards.
And this ties in really well. Josh had a really good question about the fallacy and kind of the super counterintuitive idea about doing everything the customer says they want and they'll buy. It's so counterintuitive. And when I talk to a lot of other YC founders, especially like technical folks that haven't sold before, they're, very user first mentality. It's like the right approach, but it's so counterintuitive that if you don't come with a plan, if you don't say to them, hey, this is the best way to do it, they're going to send you on a wild goose chase because, again, they don't know how to buy your thing. Even if it's the first time you're selling it, there's no way they've thought about this as much as you have, even if you're not super confident about it.
Yeah,
To
you
the
can't
point.
just do what they want because it won't work.
And to the point,
You've got to
if
guide
you do what
them.
they tell you to do, right, you're going to be out of control and you're
Right.
going to be kicking time. I mean, buyers want to be led. And if you really sit back and say, John, we have kind of like a 5-step process here we kind of go through. Would that be okay with you? No, it's my process. I don't know if this feels qualified. I mean, and we hate disqualifying deals. We have that sense of loss. I'm sorry. What do you want me to tell you? They're not going to go on a second date with you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I want to tie this back into like, what do all salespeople want? They want closed deals. What else? What do the sales managers want? Closed deals. What does a CEO want? Closed deals, right? Money flowing in the door. If you use a mutual action plan, you will almost always know the right close date. And salespeople, this eludes them. And I mean, Salesforce.com and every other CRM out there, there's a place for close date. And what I have is a bunch
Buyers
of
don't
people
like to be closed. Buyers
guessing.
don't like to be closed.
Right. And this is what I say. They have to sign or do whatever the closing thing is at some point. So look at it this way. Close dates come from customers, not quotas.
Yeah.
Right? Close date come from customers, not quotas. So if you use a mutual action plan and you know the up and running date by, you can back into when they have to do all of the things, signing on the dotted line and doing whatever else they have to do for you to make it be up and running on the date they want. So now it takes the close date and out of the hands of the customer and puts it back in your control, which people always say, well, I have no control over the close date. That's ridiculous. Of course you do, but not if you don't do a mutual action plan, because you don't know all the things you need to know to predict that close date properly. I mean, imagine a sales manager's dream would be to have the right close dates in the CRM so that they could actually forecast off of it versus exporting all the data out, jiggering it around based on how they know the close dates aren't really real and which salespeople are more optimistic and which ones are more pessimistic. Mutual action plans take all of that away. So sales leaders, if your salespeople are not using mutual action plans, get on it. CEOs, if your sales leaders don't know how to implement that and coach around mutual action plans, get on it.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, we're just looking at the time. This has flown by from 35 minutes. We got 10 left. We've gone through, I think, 2 of the questions, but no, it's been really good because we've had a number of crowdsourced questions here. I think just for folks that are going to listen to this on the recording, we've been going back and forth on the chat. A really good question, I think, tied to both what's the point of these plans and why aren't they used is when do you know it's the right deal and time to implement it? That's been one of the number one questions that I hear is like, when is the right time to start using it in a deal and how large should the deal be? All this kind of stuff. I think it really ties back to, it's a simple answer. It really ties back to, I think what Skip said, the dollar amount. How important is it for your company to close this deal? Is it a top deal that you want to invest in and make sure it closes? And also, how complex is the interpersonal collaborative relationship, right? The number of stakeholders involved. Also, I see a number of deals, and we also have this, which the deals themselves, the sales process actually might be simple, but the onboarding implementation is really complex. And you want to introduce it towards the end of the deal to make sure that you're really nailing that time to value and implementation onboarding. So many technology, especially if you're selling tech, so much of the value has to do with the implementation onboarding. Sometimes the decision's easy and there's a ton of value, and the time and investment is in the onboarding.
Hey, Aaron,
yeah.
I'll ask you because you're a user, right?
Yeah.
For a small deal to implement something like this, I'd introduce it probably at the end of the first call, because it's going to be a 2, 3, 4 sales call close. Might as well introduce it at the end of the first call. For a more bigger deal, somewhere after we've kicked tires and we think we got something done, and now we're going to start, okay, let's do a presentation. Well, that's only a first step. There's a number of things here. So right after everybody's kicked tires and said, oh, that looks like we could go on a first date here. That might be kind of fun. That's where I'd introduce it. That's typically call 2, 3. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you're doing really great discovery and early calls. And a part of discovery, I'd say I have 2 phases of my discovery. One's qualification of whether or not it's a legitimate opportunity. Second is what's next, right? Like what is going to be involved in this sales process. I then take that information and I go actually into Accord and I build based on, the subsections of a typical process. I build a custom mutual plan based on what I heard in the discovery. So that'll be a second call, third call. And then what I actually do, I want to share 2 quick things. I also, along with the mutual plan, for anyone who's listening to this, if you start implementing them, one thing I recommend is creating some kind of recurring cadence of meeting. With any of my strategic deals, I meet at least every 2 weeks with them. And when we're meeting, I'm not just asking, well, you have any updates on your side, anything like that. We screen share our Accord and we walk through it together. And it's like, okay, we're accomplishing things. We're checking boxes. We're moving forward in the sales process.
Yeah.
It's so helpful. I want to share something before we end that I think is really important, and in a cool case study as to why a mutual plan is valuable. I had one of my most strategic deals, Fortune 15 company. We had a ideal date in mind of when the contract was going to sign, and they were going to go live the next day, right? 2 days before that date, my signatory, champion, change agent, all the same person quit. And their policy within their company was that there was no 2 weeks. You were out that day. And so all of a sudden I was empty-handed, and I begged them. I said, can you please just introduce me to anyone involved in this process? They gave me an introduction. And at the beginning of the call, they're like, honestly, Aaron, I want to help you. We believe in this. We want Figma in place, but I have no idea where to start. And I was like, we're not starting. We're just finishing this. And so on that call, I opened up Accord and I shared my mutual plan. And we were 96% of the way through. And they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like we can actually make this happen. It delayed 4 days, but we signed the contract the next week, and we still use the Accord. So I think that's also a huge value add to it. Everything that's been done is in context. Yeah, it's
there's
cool.
There's some good questions in there that you Skip touched on a little bit, but how do you introduce MAP to the potential customer? Aaron, I'd like to hear what you say.
Yeah, well, I talked about
put you on the spot or anything. Yeah, master salesperson at work.
I mean, the whole thing that I talk about is that it's a mutual space, a single source for all parts of the deal. I talk about it as like a virtual deal room, right? Like we're sitting on the same side of the table, executing a plan together. I talk a lot. I put myself on, and I even shared when promoting this conversation, I shared like, I want to hold myself accountable to the things that I commit to my customers. And so I do that on the call. When I'm presenting it, I'll be like, what is something that you absolutely need from me in this process? And I will put that in writing and I will commit it and I will assign it to myself. And they love that. So, I mean, it's all about the like mutual accountability and transparency in the process. I totally changed the way that I think they think of me as a salesperson. I think they see that.
So you actually say, hey, I've been helping companies like yours for, a long time to purchase this. And we have a way that really works. It's very transparent and we will work through this together. I mean, like what kind of words are you using?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely saying that we're working through it together. I double down on accountability. I use that, and they love it. I think that people find all the time that they'll send an email to their salesperson and they don't get a response, or they get a response that's half-hearted and delayed and things like that. So I think if somebody's willing to put the time and energy into building a mutual plan, you're already like so far beyond the typical sales motion that someone might be used to. And I get that feedback. I mean, I've had my customers say, I have not felt so aligned with the salesperson as I have in this sales process. And so
how you sell matters, especially when you're trying to differentiate yourself. And the product doesn't have that much differentiation. How you sell matters.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I've heard these like amazing Gong and course recordings in the last few months as we've started to really scale the user base. And some of these clips are like literally stopping the meeting from the buyer being like, hey, I know this is being recorded. I want your manager to know that this has been like the best meeting I've had with a salesperson. Like, you're actually asking me these questions, not just like qualification if I'm going to be a buyer or the features. Like, you're asking me about how I'm going to accomplish these. It just feels so different when you can see it. When it's not just in a follow-up email, like you said, Aaron, it's not just a thing on the, even if you're trying this and you get it, people are so visual. Having something that you can share that looks super professional, that you can actually do at scale, just totally changes the way that you're working with customers. And yeah.
I think you should start a company, Ross. I think you should start a company doing this thing.
Well, one thing I've found is that it's very interesting is that sometimes the buyer takes pride in the sales process all of a sudden once they have a mutual plan. I have another situation where Accord is really cool in the way it's not a spreadsheet, it's a little bit more dynamic than that. And I can see the way that they are sharing it. I had one where they brought 43 people into the Accord. It was me, my manager, like a design advocate on our team, and then 43 people from the other side because they were obsessed with the process and they loved it. And there was intentionality behind it and they were able to communicate that internally. My
favorite is where they take a screenshot and show their boss, and the boss goes, "Wow, John, you're really on top of this." Oh, yes, I am. Hysterical.
You make them that because you make them the hero.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're doing all the work. They get to show the paper. They go, "Look at this," and the guy goes, "Wow, you must be doing a lot of work."
Right. Who doesn't want to look smart to their boss? Who doesn't want to be sure they make a decision? Here's the other thing. Buyers are really risk averse today because things are a little bit crazy, right? And not going exactly the way we all planned. And so if you can reduce some of that risk, it is going to be so much easier to get the deal closed. Remember, we're change agents, right? We're trying to get people to change, and risk is part of change. People don't want to risk what could happen. And so when you map it all out, it becomes so much clearer what the real risks are. And it's a question you can ask them, because as you're planning and going through this mutual action plan with them and they're agreeing to things, you can stop and say, oh my gosh, that seems like a heavy lift. Is your team going to be able to do that? What's the risk in asking them to do all that work? Or what's the risk if we can't meet those deadlines because your IT department is so bogged down, right? So you get to direct some deeper level questions, which you would have never gotten to without a mutual action plan.
Inside voice. You're starting to get excited, Alice.
Thank you.
That's an inside joke, folks. An inside joke.
Cool. Well, I mean, yeah, we could keep talking about all of these things for the next couple hours, but unfortunately we are at time. We're going to definitely have to figure out how to keep this conversation going and some other tips.
If you didn't get your questions answered though, send them to Ross and he'll send them to us, or just like connect with me and Skip on LinkedIn for goodness sakes. And we can answer your questions. And Aaron too. I mean, he's living this, he's doing it, he's using it. He can give you lots of information about how to do it.
Appreciate that. So we're going to actually follow up tomorrow to everyone who joined and the folks that are on sales calls right now that came up and are, dealing with their customers. We're going to send out an email. I'll share the recording with everyone, and we're going to follow up with actually a blog post to try to summarize the kind of 45 minutes into a digestible 5-10 minute read. We'll include Skip's contact information, Alice's, Aaron's, etc. So if you do want to get in touch and have further conversations, we'll make sure you're able to get in touch with everyone, ask further questions. Yeah. And if you want, feel free to check out Accord, the app that makes it really easy to do all the stuff that we're talking about. Yeah, any final words from folks before we sign off here?
Yeah,
It's-
start
it's-
today. If you're not
yeah, it's
doing
the
it
way it's-
already, start today.
It's the way to get control. I mean, and you can qualify. If they're not willing to sit there and put a mutual action plan together and they don't have one, they're probably not serious about buying. So 30% of your funnel is smoke. This is one way to help get it out.
Yeah,
and your
managers,
customers are going to
like,
appreciate
I don't
it.
know
They'll remember
why.
this.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, Aaron. But managers, I don't know why you let your salespeople get away without doing mutual action plans on your biggest deals and on your most important deals. Go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, last thing is, and we've touched on it. They'll remember this sales cycle, and it's also a representation of your company too. So I think especially those who are founders and are doing like a founder-led sales process, this is a great way to get their trust in the future of your company too. So.
Absolutely. One last thing, when you do these mutual action plans and then you identify who needs to be involved besides the people that you're actually doing the plan with, it helps you know when to bring your senior executives in, and it helps you use them really wisely and get them really well positioned. So just another reason to use a mutual action plan.
Yeah, 1,000,001. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy days, Skip.
Ross,
Alice,
thanks.
Aaron.
Alice, thanks.
Yeah,
Aaron,
thank you,
thanks.
Skip,
Yeah.
Aaron, Ross. Awesome.
Pleasure.
Thank you to the audience
Yeah.
for being
Yes.
here.
Super appreciate all the questions and comments, everyone. All right.
Cool.
Catch you later. Thanks again.
All right, everyone. See ya.